who don't know about Sam Santhosh, he's a Renaissance man. He's a Renaissance man. He's somebody who identified that the big wave is going to happen, the two big waves that have happened in our lifetimes. The software wave that happened in the 80s, he was one of the earliest people to have ridden that. And then when the genomic revolution was happening in the 2000s, he was among the pioneers. So he's been somebody who I think the entrepreneurial world really admires in terms of the amount of startups, and he's converted into very successful models of ethical business. Sam is not just a businessman or a history buff, as this book would show you. He's also a passionate conservationist. He's doing an exciting project called Hortus Malabaricus, which is conserving the plants that are native to the Malabar region. And he's done something truly remarkable for getting all those plants together and putting them together in a place where everybody can view them. So Sam's book, I would say, is virtually a guide, an essential guide for anybody, any youngster who is wanting to venture into the space of entrepreneurship, business, or even if they are looking to join a career. This is a book that you should be reading first. Every management graduate, everybody who's in the IITs and the engineering space should read this book. It's a short book. It's a book that you can finish in one night, but it's a book that you will come back to again and again because there are lessons within lessons, and it's very, very interestingly written. It shows the passion of Sam Santhosh in the whole process of how he's written it, drawing richly from history, his own experience, as well as a lot of very interesting literature. So I'm going to now hand it over to Sam and ask him about what actually motivated him to write this book, and why is it that this book in particular is so different from the others that are there in the market. I mean, there's so many that you see in the airports that are listed, that are up there. So Sam, over to you.
Thanks, Pranay. Thanks for your very kind words. As you can see from the cover of the book, I been as an entrepreneur for more than 35 years. So always wanted to write some books, at the end of the journey. And a book on entrepreneurship was always in the cards. But I thought, there's time. But now in India, especially in the last maybe 10 years, we can see thousands of youngsters jumping out to start their companies. I mean, startups is no longer a bad word. Not the time like when we started companies 30 years or 35 years back. So, but at the same time, they are all very young and very naive, and have a lot of passion, and jumping into it without really being aware of all the pitfalls that are there in that journey. So, like Pranay said, there are many books that helps business in business and entrepreneurship. But my book is focused a little differently, because I am focusing the book on the Indian entrepreneur. Right? And especially the first time Indian entrepreneur. So, and why should there be a book for the Indian entrepreneur? I mean, aren't we all the same? I mean, what is the difference between an Indian entrepreneur and an American entrepreneur? So there is. So the book focuses on the decision making that we take. So the whole journey of entrepreneurship is a series of decisions that you take. Many of them may be very trivial. What will be your logo? What will be your, things like that. But many of them will be very consequential, which you seldom realize when you are taking those decisions, especially in the early part of your journey, when there's very little people to guide you, who nobody talks about your risk profile. Nobody asks you hey, should you really be starting a company now? I mean, there is a lot of time left. Why should you jump into an entrepreneurship journey now? So those are things that need to be thought about. And then there are many, many important questions that you need to address. So that I felt there wasn't anything in the market that puts that story. So I framed that as 12 commandments. I mean, they're not really commandments. That is just partly humorous words. But just to get you to think on the 12 things, and as you go through the journey, things to be aware of, and when you take critical decisions. So that is the whole logic of the book.
Well, I think, I read it in a day and a half, the reason why it took me not a day but a day and a half is because I kept going back, and it is a ready reckoner. And, I for one found this, had I read this as a young man, I would have perhaps made better life decisions.
You're still young.
Thank you, Sam. But my point here is that, Sam, I think one thing that, how do you distinguish Indian entrepreneur? I mean, of course, you lay down the history and you talk about the deep Indian history and cultural ethos and the cultural framework under which we all emerge. And you, of course, allude to a lot about your own background in Kerala and as how you, studied or how you read Tarzan comics and Casper and other things. That's a very fascinating section of your book. It gives a glimpse about your own childhood. But how is it that our childhoods and our development is different, and therefore the journey as an entrepreneur therefore different? And how is it that you see it differently? I mean, without revealing the entire story of the book, I mean, what is it that you would like to tell the audience?
Yeah, so that is why I take a lot of effort in the book to define the Indian psyche. So my theme or my claim is that we think a little differently. There are a lot of values and lot of some bad things as well that we carry. So some great values and tradition that we have from our 3,000-year history, and some baggage that we subconsciously carry. I didn't plan to attend the earlier talk here, yes. But the earlier talk, the session that was here, the ladies were clearly explaining, right, how women are being discriminated in India. So, and even yesterday in another session, we were talking about the lack of women workforce in India, in the workforce. I mean, they do a lot of work at home, but they are not paid for it. Second, their competencies are not really fully utilized when they're just doing housework. So many of them, even leave the workforce after they have a child or children, and then they find it very difficult to come back to the workforce. Anyway, so coming back to the question from Pranay is that, so the challenge that we Indians have is that we carry this lot of baggage as a patriarchal society. And we tend to make many decisions without really understanding what are the things that are driving us to take those decisions. So those are things that I try to point out in the book, that you should be aware, sort of differentiating between the system 1 level thinking and the system 2 level thinking. Take your time and realize and what are you deciding and what you should be doing. And so it becomes very, very important for us to realize where we are coming from and what we should be doing.
So one of the things, I mean, the 12 commandments that are mentioned in the book, I mean, some of them are so vital. I mean, they're commandments that I wish everybody knows. And I think it is, even if there are people in the audience who have successful businesses, there are some eye-opening things. And one of the eye-openers that I thought was, that to my mind was very, very revealing, was the fact that Indian companies, especially Indian startups, do not have a CFO. I mean, they have a finance head and they have finance and administration head, typical, which is seen in, say, family-owned businesses or in government offices, that you have a finance and administration person grouped together. But what Sam brings here is that something that is very different, because if you're looking at venture capital, if you're looking at risky business, then you need somebody who's on top of that risk business, to understand that, to manage those risks. And I think, Sam, you need to talk about that a little more in detail, because you bring a very, very important point to the fore.
Thanks, Pranay. Yeah, that is something which is seldom highlighted, and that is what I felt one important thing that is different between the Indian entrepreneur and the Western entrepreneur. So, I've been living in the last maybe 30, 35 years in the US, and any startup you look at, any startup you take, one of the first, either part of the founding team or one of the first employees will be the CFO. The Chief Financial Officer is a very critical cog in setting up the company properly, making sure the right funding is taken, making sure that all the processes that the company needs to follow are set up. So if they are not all set up properly, your starting DNA is not the right one, right? So you may tend to make a lot of mistakes without being aware that you're committing the mistakes. So in my first journey in the software industry, I did about 8 acquisitions in the second part of my journey in that. So at that time I had a chance to review and study about 100 odd companies. I mean, to get 8 acquisitions, you need to go through a lot of companies in different parts of the world. So that was like very striking. Wherever the company was, whether it is UK, US or India, if it is an Indian entrepreneur, you don't see a CFO. Right? Even though they're 5 years or 10 years old, you don't see a CFO. And they think it's a very creditable thing that they have done because they have cut costs. The CEO thinks I've done a good job, I am managing the finances, right? Without being aware that he's not really the competent person to handle the finances. So it is a sort of traditional baggage that we carry because most of our traditional early businesses were India were trading businesses. So when you're in trading business, it is pretty important for the owner to have the control over the cash box. I mean, and it is a very limited, transactions in the sense that you're not going to make an acquisition, you're not going to get acquired. So I could see that all the Indian companies that I acquired, their value went significantly down during the due diligence process. Because there will be so many weaknesses in the company that become very evident when our people go in and do the due diligence. Many contracts are not signed, they don't have non-compete to the senior employees who have left. So they would have very weak systems. So this leaves the company in a very poor state and they are unable to justify. There are so many spreadsheets and it's all very haphazard. So that brings down the value of the company down. But that is actually one of the smaller things. More importantly, there will be even worse things that can happen when you get into some lawsuits, when you don't have proper documentation, when you don't have all the other bells and whistles which is very important for a company. So in the startup world, the whole journey is very different. So a CFO is needed upfront.
I think, given that venture capitalists look for strong commitment of due diligence and rigor in terms of management of funds, I think this is something that needs to be underlined in bold. And I think I have not seen very many writers and even blog posts or even YouTube channels of very popular venture capital companies, say Y Combinator and others. I have never seen anybody stress the need for a CFO as much as what Sam talks about. And I think I'm now going to draw your attention to commandment number 7, which was one of my favorites, other than the CFO story, and which is how we invite the gorilla. How do we end up tickling the gorilla and making them trample all over you? So tell us the gorilla story, and tell us about the monkeys, and tell us that whole fascinating analogy that you draw about, watch out for the gorilla. I thought that was a fascinating chapter.
Yeah.
Please brief us on that.
Sure. Since most of you may not have seen the book yet, I'm sure all of you are going to run and buy the book after this.
Please do. It's a wonderful book. I assure you it's fun.
So the 7th commandment is like, watch out for the gorillas. What I mean here is that typically in a startup world, I am showing all our startups as like sort of the monkeys in that jungle, right? And we are all competing against each other, all the monkeys. So the monkeys are very aware of what the other monkeys are doing. So they are all worried, like, if there's a press release from a competitor, the small company gets worried and they are all very much focused on the other companies in the field. But they tend to forget, but the other monkeys are okay. They can't do much damage to you. What can really happen to you, sort of like the black swan, what Nicholas Taleb says, are the things that are outside your control. And there will be one or two or maybe a few gorillas, very big players in your industry, whose actions can significantly affect your business. They may not be trying to hurt you, and sometimes they may be too, but let us be fair and say like, okay, their objective is not to hurt you. But at the same time, because of their plans, or maybe because of two gorillas in the industry fighting against each other, those examples I show in the book where I went through. So they take some decisions which will significantly affect the prospects of your business. So those are the things that as an entrepreneur in your startup, you need to be very, very careful to see, hey, in my business area, in my domain, who are the big guys? And how do I position myself in that ecosystem? If that is useful in many ways, not only to watch out for what they do which might affect you, but also positioning yourself such a way that if you want to get acquired, if there's a gap in the offerings of a Gorilla. I mean, Gorilla is a big company, right? So they have maybe many divisions and they have many things to do. But often they miss out small opportunities which their product may not have some features, or they might have an add-on product which your company's product may fit. So in the US that is very common. In fact, at some time, companies like Cisco and all used to average acquire one company a day, right? So there would be many startups who would actually take office in the same lane. So that they position themselves not only in their product, but also actual positioning where their office is located to make the acquisition easy, and also to be in the eyesight and in the interaction with the key people of the large company. So I don't want to go into the stories because they are already in the book, but that is an important point I think all entrepreneurs would need to keep in mind.
You know, the book is beautifully illustrated. It's got these caricatures and cartoons, and Sam is one of the features in it. I mean, they've lampooned Sam, which I think is not very fair. I think Sam is more handsome.
I made it,
so you paid for it, but yeah, but
no, I made it.
Oh, you made them. Oh, congrats.
I didn't draw it.
Oh, okay.
But what I mean, sketched it.
Oh, you sketched it. Okay, wonderful. I mean, I didn't know that. It comes out as somebody else has done.
Yeah. They
Okay.
made final cartoon.
Okay, right. So, you know, I mean, I have more questions, but you know, one of the parting, I mean, I know we are running, eating into audience question time, but
Yeah.
I just had one final
No, I
question.
think this is about 5 minutes. After this, we get 10 minutes.
We get 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can go
Okay, then we are easy. Okay, I can breathe easy. So one of the things you talk about is government, and I think you talk about the government in the Gorilla chapter
I
also.
missed that. Yeah, government is also.
I think so. When is a government a gorilla and not a monkey? You know, it can also be a monkey.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about that
Yeah.
part?
So that's a point I missed out when we talked about the gorilla. So it's actually the government can be the biggest gorilla. I mean, you know, and the government, again, the government's intention most probably is not to hurt a startup or hurt your startup or company. But the government, in their own wise ways, will take decisions and implement rules which certainly will affect your company, right? And you are very less prepared for that typically, unless you are clearly watching out for it. Even some simple things like maybe they change the customs duty, you know. So suddenly maybe you have a bunch of competing products from China that can make your product obsolete in a few days or non-competitive. Similarly, they might increase the customs duty of something which you are importing, and then you know you are at a loss. And they might make some other laws or data privacy or you know things like that. So, but one argument is that affects everybody. So it's not like it is targeted at you, but you may be in a vulnerable position where you have to be more aware and ready to change and handle whatever those new rules are.
Commandment number 9 is very, very pertinent to India. It is not only pertinent to entrepreneurs, but also to all of us. And that is the mediocrity trap. So Sam brings about this whole notion that, you know, we are all in a spiral that drives us into mediocrity. Sam, tell us something more.
Sure. So this is actually a little more down the journey. So the 12 commandments I put up in the order, typically in the order by which somebody would go in an entrepreneurial journey, from starting, deciding whether to become an entrepreneur, to the final exit, and then, you know, understanding what you should do after that. So this is sort of the later end, because we often hear we most of the time hear only the great successes. I mean, everybody here will know Byju's or Ola, a handful of or 10 of them. For every one of them, there must be at least 10,000 other companies which are, you know, have not made it, right? So, and especially in India, that is a big challenge because we sort of are hesitant to admit failure. So that is and it's not really a failure, but I'm just saying getting out, move on. So that's why I'm saying mediocrity is worse than failure. So even if you are closing down, the startup is considered a failure, it is better than wallowing in mediocrity. And that is not as rare as it might seem to many of you who may not be in the business. But if you are in the industry and if you look around, we will see, like I said, hundreds or thousands of companies for every mediocre companies for every successful company. And that is partly due to some other problems in India too. It is very difficult to close a company. Because the government, all the legal things, it takes 2 to 3 years. So, you know, you are reluctant to do that. Secondly, you think that, oh, now what will everybody think of me? What will the society think of me? Oh, am I a failure? And, you know, so how will it affect me? And more importantly, here in an Indian context, the entrepreneur is, or the founder of the company is sort of seen as the owner. I mean, traditionally, because it's all family businesses, and so you own the company and you are fully associated with the company. Now, after a couple of rounds of funding and in the journey, maybe 5-6 years down the lane, you might be only owning like 10 or 20% of the company. But as a founder, the whole ecosystem sees you as the company. So what does it mean? So if the company has to close down, all the liabilities, some loans or all the employees' liabilities, everything will come to you. So all your other investors all have very limited liability.
Yeah.
They might lose the money or they might get a small part of the money that they put in. But solving all the liabilities and bringing a complete closure is you and or one or two people in your founding team. So that is not an easy process, and bankruptcy process also, if you go into, it's a long, cumbersome process here. So in the US and all, it is very fast. In a month, you're out of the system, right? And the court takes over. The court then takes all the assets, converts that into money, and proportionately settles all the debt, and you're out of it. And there's no bad mark or anything like that. That's why even Trump is still becoming president after having many bankruptcies, right? so you can make any claims even after you're a very successful businessman.
Right. I think, it's now question time. So if there are burning questions, please raise your hands. Otherwise, I have more questions to ask Sam, because this book is so lovely. I can ask more questions. So can I see a raise of hands, please? Oh, 1, 2. Very good. Please go ahead, sir. Yeah, please.
Sam, I haven't read the book, but I'll pick it up right now. Which is your favorite commandment, or which do you think you got right? And which do you think is the most vital if you had to choose one?
Well, I think the relearn to learn is, I would personally love as the best commandment I like. Because irrespective of, like Pranay said, irrespective of whether you are in business or an entrepreneur, as an Indian, we need to really get out of the way that we have been schooled. So the way our schooling system, the education system has been in such a way that many of you actually don't really like to learn. Right? Learning is seen as something you do for getting some marks, and after your formal education, people stop learning. So that, I think, is the biggest disadvantage that we have as a society. So we really need to fix that. We need to really relearn to learn and enjoy learning.
Right. Thank you, Sam. That was a wonderful point that you brought. There's another question right in front. Please go ahead.
Hi, Sam. I haven't read your book. I'll buy and read.
You must.
Yeah. I have, I don't know, you also would have noticed this, the new generation entrepreneurs, unlike your time, these days, the focus is more on investor than on the customer.
Yeah.
If you see, there is always there is too much of importance on what the investor would like than what your customer would like. So how do you see that, and what is your?
Yeah, very good point. I don't address that specifically like the way you said in the book, but indirectly it is addressed in the 2 commandments. One is like, from where do you get your money, right? So choose the right funding. So that becomes really matches that. You should not be driven by the investor, so, right? So, but you have to plan that very carefully. Otherwise, you are at their mercy. So how do you plan your journey? And you have to really make sure that, I wouldn't say customer alone, but many other stakeholders. I mean, your other co-founders, your employees, your future as the company, and where do you want to go. And your customer obviously is a very important part of it, but customers can change. So it doesn't mean that you completely have to make a product or your company to match a specific set of customer. But customer focus is very important. But I would put in a lot of other parameters. But more importantly, to come to your point, yes, we should not be driven by what the investor wants. And unfortunately, because of the hype and because of the way the whole thing is going, there is a big tendency to get caught in that. There's another big disadvantage which people don't think of when we talk about following the investor. The investor, I'm talking about professional investor. I'm not talking about like your friend or a high net worth individual investing in a company where the goals may be more aligned with your goals. Now for a professional investment company like a venture capital company or a private equity company, you are just one among the portfolio, right? So let us say they have 50 companies, you are like 1 in 50. So it's not like a derogatory, but what I'm trying to say is that they are not that focused on you. And in fact, they want to quickly figure out if you will succeed or not in that time frame. They have a time frame. They are not into this for the rest of their life, or they are not in a long journey. They are in a very short journey. Most of the funds will have a 5-year, 7-year, maybe 8-year time frame. So they have to invest in the company, make the company successful, and get out. And they have some money left for follow-on investments. So that they can give to everybody. So they sprayed it to maybe 10, 20, 30 companies in one domain. They want to see who are the 4 or 5 good ones that will grow, so that they can continue and make them the winners. They don't care what happens to the rest. Sure. Right? So you are at your own. And so that is why you shouldn't be at their mercy. You should be able to stand up to them. And why I put up basically for the first 5-6 years, you should have 51% of the equity of the company, you meaning you and your co-founders. So you are your own man.
Good. Any other questions? But the organizers are giving me a look that I need to end quickly. Is there one last question? Okay, then maybe I should ask the last question to you. I'm going to be provocative now. Okay. I'm going to instigate you. So do you really think that Indian unicorns, is there one Indian unicorn you think is world class in terms of its product, in terms of its service, and in terms of its endurance? Most of them, to my mind, are Me Too's. You could find a reflection of that having happened in the West, somewhere in America, in Europe, or in China. So, for a Baiju, I can think of 5 other alternatives. For a Flipkart, I think I can think of 10. So, what, according to you, is a unique unicorn from India, which is a world-class model?
You should have given me some more warning earlier. Maybe I should have been better prepared for that. Pranay is very right. Most of the unicorns here, but again, like the gentleman here pointed out, most of these unicorns have been created partly by the funds. So the investment funds are become very comfortable if they know the model, right? And if they know how that has been successful. And if you look at most of the large investors in India, whether it's Sequoia or 8 Roads or any of the big names that you look here, they all have been in the US, first wave. Then you can also see that they were in China in the second wave. So all of them would have invested heavily in China and created all the lookalikes. The American lookalikes, Alibaba and all those, Baidu, all that in China. And now they see India as the next level. So they see, they will grow those. They are very anxious and eager to put money into those companies where the model is clear. It has already been successful in the West, and India just gives more scale. So, but if you really want to know which company will be a very unique unicorn, is my company MedGenome.
That's true. I agree with that. I was going to.
It's not a unicorn yet. It is like what you can call as a soonicorn, which will soon become a unicorn. So we are very unique.
Right. Yeah. I think that actually comes back to your commandment number 2, which says, choose the idea with the best potential for success, not the one that you are most passionate about. So I think that's where the venture capitalists also invest. They know that the model has worked elsewhere, and they know that they're going to back it up in a country. A demography and the market size that India proposes or has is incredible. So I can understand the Me Too's happening in India, therefore, the copies.
But still it is good.
It is fine, it is good.
There's no way to, no need to.
That's good. So SciGenome and MedGenome, therefore, to my mind, are not the unicorn, the soonicorns. And I wish you the best for not only your ventures, but also for this book. Like I said, this is a book that I think everybody should read. It has nuggets of information, even if you're an established venture capitalist or somebody who has his own startup which is doing well, you're on Series A, Series B, Series C, wherever you are in terms of funding. Even then, this has nuggets of information that you can use, and it's a book that you should cherish. It's not a book that you're going to read it once, although it looks lightweight. There is very, very interesting wisdom that Sam brings in from about 35 years of his venturial experience, and I wish him the best as he starts his journey as an author, and all the very best, Sam, for the success for this book. Thank you so much, organizers.